Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Wise Woman podcast. I am extremely ecstatic about today's episode. We have my dear friend, Rabbi Sofia Zway, to chat with us about, wow, one of the most interesting topics that has greatly supported me in my life, which is sacred Jewish birth rituals and so much more. We're going to be talking about a lot. Rabbi Sofia, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm good. I'm actually nursing my 3-month-old as we speak, but it's the realities of being a working mom, I guess, right? You know all about it.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
grateful to be here with you talking about my favorite topic in the universe. Other than
Yay.
my daughter, of course.
Absolutely. So I think it's so important for listeners to know that in real life, Sophia and I are actually quite good friends. Sophia ended up marrying one of my dear friends, Rabbi Brett. John and I went to their wedding in South Africa. But the thing that's just so divine and how God likes to work is Brett and John are neighbors. So we're like so connected in so many different ways. We've all lived in Israel. We all are deeply spiritual. And when I was about to have Eden, I definitely leaned on Brett and Sophia a lot during that time. So, Sophia, before we dive into these specific practices and rituals, can you just tell us a little bit of your backstory?
For sure, yeah. So I was born at home. That's a big piece of also how I got interested in this work. I was a home birth, born in Ecuador to two amazing, adventurous South African parents. I lived in Ecuador until I was 8 years old, and after a kind of violent house robbery, we moved back to South Africa, where I spent, the rest of my life, really. Grew up in a secular family, kind of discovered the Judaism piece through summer camp, where I completely fell in love, realized Judaism was awesome and fun and personal and engaging. Had a bat mitzvah at the age of 16, did a gap year in Israel, came back that year, like super energized, thinking about the rabbinate, got really involved in my home synagogue in Cape Town while I was at university and just like fell deeper and deeper in love with Judaism, realized like the rabbinate was what I wanted, had to figure out how to attain that, being from South Africa where there are no seminaries. Had a really generous family member who supported me on that journey and ended up studying at Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion for a year in Jerusalem and then a year in New York. And then I transferred out to Los Angeles where Brett was in school, so that we could be together, and finished out my rabbinical school years at HUC in Los Angeles. And since graduating, I have taught at a Los Angeles high school, which was something else. And at the moment, Rabbi Brett and I run a community from our home for Jews in their 20s and 30s. And it's really amazing to be building this really intentional, sacred community from like the home and the heart. And it feels very much like my dream rabbinate at the moment.
And it really is. Your home is so welcoming and warm. I was just with you guys in LA. It's the best. What you're building in LA is so nourishing and desperately needed, right? Like really a new way to connect.
Totally, totally. And we're really seeing how much the community means to people and how it's making people energized to be Jewish again, which is amazing.
Just because I love this story, can you tell people a little bit? Because it's so divine how you and Brett met in Israel. Just like
Uh-huh.
how,
For sure. Yeah, yeah. We were it was the summer before I even applied to rabbinical school, and it was like right before he started. We were both on a Hebrew summer program in Jerusalem, and he arrived a couple of days late to the program. My first day, I was like, "Am I gonna meet my bashert here?" And then there were like no eligible bachelors, day one. I was like, okay, I guess now I'll just like learn Hebrew and have a great time. And then 2 days later, he walks into the highest level class, which is where I was, and very confidently, he says, "Hi, I'm Brett in Hebrew. Hi, I'm Brett from Chicago." And he had these gorgeous blue eyes, and I was completely bowled over immediately. I thought my Hebrew was like way not nearly at the right level. So I dropped down a level because I was just too smitten with him. But then I came back because the other class was too easy, and we had this kind of whirlwind summer romance, and didn't neither of us understood that the universe would open up pathways for us to end up together. It just felt like a girl from South Africa and a guy from America. How's this ever going to work? And somehow it did. And we've now been for almost 3 years. And we have a beautiful
Amen.
baby.
You do have a beautiful baby. It's so fun. It's so divine how you're from different places in the world and yet you always find each other. It's just
Totally.
a really, it's a Hashem's will, right? It's something we can always
100%.
relax into. I love it. It's beautiful. And I remember I was in Israel and Brett's like, I have this amazing woman in my life. She's from South Africa. She's you were away at the time. I think you were back in South Africa. And I love how you guys found each other and your wedding. So they got married in 2021, going into 2022, when South Africa was a red zone during COVID. And everyone's like, no, like, don't go, you're gonna get COVID. And we end up going, and it was like the best time absolutely ever. We did end up getting COVID, but it was like, it's just so funny how everyone got
Worst
COVID except for
places.
you guys.
I know. Well, there are worse places in the world to get COVID. You know what I'm saying? Like, worst
Oh
case
my
scenario,
God.
stuck in Cape Town. I mean, it was.
It was amazing. We got an Airbnb in Hout Bay. We were next to a nude beach. We ate oysters. Like we had an absolute blast. But truly one of the most memorable, exquisite weddings. Something special that Brett and Sophia did is they had their friends be part of the ceremony. And I know for me, that was a huge honor. Anyways, there's so much that we can dive into. I just really want listeners to know that I am bringing forward one of the most genuine people I know, and I know you're going to feel that in this episode as well. Let's dive into your beautiful expertise.
Yeah.
Tell us about Jewish rituals that we can move into specifically for the birthing process.
Beautiful. So, when I was in rabbinical school, for our 5th year, we have to write a thesis or a capstone. And I was really interested in doing mine, on the topic, something related to spirituality and childbirth, pregnancy. And I kind of was always baffled by how Jewish wisdom, Jewish tradition is so rich when it comes to ritual, for just about every moment in life except pregnancy. There's very little kind of fixed into Jewish ritual that has to do with pregnancy and childbirth. So I said, great, this is what I want to research. This is what I want to create. And it was really fun learning more about these ancient folk customs that Jews and communities around the world, practiced for a long time, but that somehow never made it into the kind of, I don't know, I should maybe the Ashkenazi Jewish world. It seems like these other kind of Mizrahi Sephardic communities had a lot of wisdom. And I think a big piece of why we don't have these customs is, I think, for many years, like, women were not on the front lines of Jewish transmission outside of the home. Of course, they were in the home, but in terms of how we received prayer and Torah, a lot of that was transmitted by men. And I think women had this like incredible wisdom that was really kind of kept sacred, within the feminine realm and within the home. And only, I think, since, the waves of feminism in the modern era and the entry of women into the rabbinate and ritual innovation have we started to see more of these sacred, feminine practices entering the mainstream tradition. So a few things that I learned. There are prayers that people can recite during pregnancy. Psalm 100. Now I'm going to butcher it. Let me just remember which one it is. Psalm 100 and I'm sorry, Erin, give me a minute. The psalm that we sing at Birkat Hamazon, those who sow, which has the words, "Those who sow in tears will reap in joy." That is actually a psalm that is central to the experience of childbirth, right? Those who sow in tears will reap in joy. There's this like absolute intensity to the experience of giving birth. That is then, right, we're blessed with a baby at the end of it. And those tears that we that we cry during the birth like lead to this beautiful thing. And so there is a custom of reciting those psalms, right before the birth process. I'm going to pause for a second, and I just want to clarify, if you want to hear about the ones that I wrote, if you want to hear about what existed already, or like where do you want to go with this conversation?
What are the ones that you wrote?
That I wrote. Okay. So I wrote some new rituals based on what I had learned in my studies of what like people had done in ancient times. And I'm curious, I know you used one of them in your birth, and I'd love to hear what that experience was like for you. So I'll say that we used two of them with Dahlia when she was born. The first ritual is actually one for pregnancy, which is my absolute favorite. And it's based on a Sephardic ritual known as the cortadura de fachadura, which means the cutting of the swaddling cloth. And the original ritual was like this beautiful ceremony that happened around the 5 to 7 month mark. All the women would come together and they'd gather and there'd be like sweets and almonds and singing and this like beautiful lace tablecloth that would kind of get cut. And then that material would be used for the baby, like when the baby was born, to swaddle the baby. I was really inspired by that. And my favorite Jewish ritual object is a talit, the Jewish ritual the fringes, the tzitzit, which remind us of the obligation to keep God's commandments. And I always look at the tzitzit and I think, wow, these kind of look like an umbilical cord, right? And I think of them now as a spiritual umbilical cord that kind of connects us to God and to what it means to be a Jew. And this particular ritual involves the creation of a talit from beginning to end, where you, at different stages of the pregnancy, take a moment to sit with your partner and reflect on the hopes, the fears, whatever's going on in the body, whatever's happening in the pregnancy, to offer a prayer up to God that things should please God be good, and involves tying, learning how to tie these tzitzit, these sacred kind of fringes, tying them at different stages of the pregnancy as a way to mark that journey, culminating in the ninth month as kind of the final fringe, and then decorating the fabric in whatever way is meaningful to people. And then once you have a baby, please God, God willing, being able to wrap the baby in that talit at the baby naming, at the bris, whatever it is. And, I think marking that journey from beginning to beginning, because birth is certainly not the end, in a way that both brings you together with your partner, connects you to the hopes and the fears, connects you to the spiritual aspect, is really meaningful. And to recognize that it is a journey and there is a lot at stake and there's a lot of unknowns, and finding the tools to cope with those unknowns. And for me, that was a really meaningful ritual. And we did, in fact, wrap Dahlia in it at her baby naming, which was really sweet. I don't know if she'll ever wear that tallis again, but it doesn't matter. It was for me, not for her.
That's beautiful, so delicious and inspiring that that I agree with you how the tzitzit look like an umbilical cord. It's something you can like plug in to receive wisdom from Hashem. It's so powerful. It's like the wisdom we give to our baby in our womb. The ritual, and I remember reading that because you shared your dissertation with me, when John and I did a couple things, but one very specific one that we read from your dissertation was the lighting of the candle. When,
Yeah.
like, right before I was going to go from home to the birthing center, we lit a candle and we took a moment to bless the experience. Can you tell us a little bit about that candle ritual?
Absolutely. So sorry.
No, you're perfect.
So that particular ritual, there was a teaching in the Talmud that really kind of horrified me. Um, it's really interesting to think about like where do these ideas come from? And I guess like the rabbis lived in a world of probably really high maternal mortality rate. But they say in the Talmud, like, oh, the reason women died in childbirth was because they neglected the three mitzvot that they were responsible for, which was candles and mikvah and what am I forgetting? Why am I forgetting it? Can motzi, right? Making challah, lighting candles, and immersing in the mikvah. So I wanted to create a ritual that would kind of push back against that, right? That could reclaim those three mitzvot in a positive way instead of in a negative way. And so that particular ritual basically involved also birth also happens in 3 stages, right? We have those three mitzvot, we have the 3 stages of birth. And so I wanted to incorporate each of those ritual objects into a ritual at each stage of the birth. So at the very beginning, kind of at the onset of contractions, was when I indicated for, the partners, the couple, to light a candle. And that there might be safety issues involved with a candle in a birthing room. But however symbolically that it could be. And recognizing God, as a source of light, that like the very first thing that God created was light, right on day one, let there be light, and there was light, and inviting light into the birth space. And starting with that, for that to be the energy, right? This positive, flowful energy. There's also a teaching in the Jewish tradition that the soul of a human is compared to a flame from God, which is also a really beautiful connection to the candle at the beginning of labor. So that was kind of stage one. Then once the baby was born, that would be an opportunity to connect to the ritual of motzi, of the bread, and inviting, you know, after being depleted from 40 hours of childbirth or however many hours, like just a little piece of nourishment, that comes from the earth in a similar way that a baby kind of comes from like the earth of its mother's womb. And then once the placenta has been born, to take water and to drink a cup of water and to bless that in a way that the baby came from water from the living waters of the womb. And I shared that ritual with someone who's a doula, and she pointed out to me how it also involved the four elements, right? Fire, water, earth, and air, which I thought was really cool, as well as kind of the four elements of the universe as we kind of birth our baby into being. I'm curious how that experience was for you, because we didn't do this one. I was like way too caught up in my labor to have the foresight to like gather all these things. I'm curious how it landed, the parts of it that you incorporated, how it landed with you.
We were in Israel for our baby moon. We did Italy, Croatia, and Israel. And in Israel, in Tzfat, at the candle shop, which I know you know, the candle shop in Tzfat. It's this beautiful store filled with exquisite candles of all different types. And John and I bought a candle, and we said, when I go into labor, we'll light this candle, and we're going to move into Sophia's ritual as we light this candle. And it was sometimes I think we move through rituals just to say that we did it. And for me, that ritual was significant because it set this moment from, I have been having contractions for the last day in my home, and now I'm going to the birthing center and I'm having this baby. Little did I know that it would still be the next day.
Right.
And in that moment, I was feeling, it's such a crazy moment, right? You're having these waves of contractions. I wasn't feeling really seen by my doula that was at our house that whole time. And John was so amazing. And we were getting ready to go to the birthing center. And I just knew that the elevation of the experience had to occur. And I almost lit the candles in hopes that it would be a spiritual elevation, that it would kind of get me to the next level that's needed to have this baby come swiftly, like ideally soon. So we lit the candles, we shared the prayer that you have written, or the intention that you have written, and then we went to the birthing center. And it, for us, was like a transition, like a ritual of transition.
And that's beautiful. And I think that's exactly the point of ritual, right? The purpose that it serves is very much to move us through transitions and to help us kind of mark a transition in some way, and like get us safely from one side of a state of being into another, right? We use the term liminal a lot. I don't know if you've heard that term before. My favorite word. The idea of the liminal, right? Where you're not quite here and you're not quite there. You're stuck between two places, between two worlds. And ritual is what we have to mark those liminal moments and to help us get from one side of them to the other. And birth is the quintessential liminal space, right? Babies literally move through a tiny passage to get from the water world into the earth world.
And liminal is also ether, the space in between. So it's another element that you can honor. And in my book, I talk about liminal as in like the liminal action, which is the little rituals or tasks or the things we do day in and day out end up becoming our life. How we spend our days is what becomes how we spend our life. And I also love thinking about it in that route of transition, the liminal transition.
How did you mark your transition into motherhood? Because I think that's a something that was perhaps missing in some ways from the work that I did, that there wasn't enough focused on what does it mean to kind of transition being not a mother into being a mother. And I'm curious, I'll tell you what I did. We went to the mikvah. We actually Brett and I went together, which was really special. But I wanted to go for me and to kind of make that transition. And for me, that was really important to be able to step into the space of like, okay, within the next month, there's gonna be a baby, and I'm not gonna be old Sophia anymore. I'm gonna be a mom. I'm gonna, I don't necessarily lose everything of who I was, but I'm gonna become somebody new, and that always comes with some level of loss and grief, I guess, as much as it comes with possibility and hope. So I wanted to mark that, and I'm curious if there was something that you did to honor that transition.
Well, you saw me. You saw me 6 weeks postpartum, and I cried to you. I said, "This is so hard. I'm so out of my mind. I'm so unwell." It's all I could think about was how out of my mind I was. So for me, and obviously now, to just honor the experience, I'm the happiest I've ever been. Being with Eden is the greatest joy of my whole entire being. And it took me about 3 to 6 months to anchor in my body. So I love that you went to the mikvah. You even said to me, "Erin, go to the mikvah." And I should have listened. And
By the way, you still can go to
I
the
still
mikveh,
can.
and even as you kind of have found your balance again.
Oh, thank God, right? Baruch Hashem, every day I wake up every single day grateful to have my head. Oh my God, I thank God every day. A specific thing that I feel landed for me is I got over myself and I finally allowed my nervous system to relax. And I was able to speak about exactly what I needed, which truly, it was very basic. I needed incredibly nourishing food and I needed help in the morning so that I could just get 1 to 2 more hours of sleep. And John stepped up in the biggest way, still does and holds that space for me to have the morning time.
Yours
And
have such supportive husbands and fathers and
Baruch Hashem, absolutely, it's amen. What other rituals? So if the mikvah isn't accessible for somebody or it doesn't resonate, it totally resonates for me. I just don't, as a spiritual Jewish woman, I don't specifically go to a mikvah attached to a synagogue. I'll go shower, take a bath, hop into the lake, hop into the ocean, and that's always resonated more with me because thank God I spent a lot of time by amazing bodies of water. What if that doesn't resonate? What's another ritual somebody can move into to mark their shift from maiden to mother?
It's a really good question. I think each person can create that ritual, right, in a way that's meaningful using ritual objects that might be meaningful to a specific person. I think also gathering with other women and inviting like the wisdom of other women into that space to kind of share that with you, to say, here's what I've learned about this, or here's who you are as a person, here's who I think you'll be as a mom, here's what I wish for you as you mark this transition. And just being witnessed. I think the power of witnessing is a really huge piece of this, of ritual in general, I think, of being witnessed in that transition. And I would say, invite the sacred women in your life to join you, invite them to bless your belly, to bless you, and to not lose sight of you. I think we live in a world that is so focused on the baby. And there is a loss in terms of kind of giving love and care to the new mom and the new dad. Honestly, I think, I felt like people kind of overlooked Brett in this journey, as in many ways, and he was going through this as much as I was. And our birth had some pretty traumatic elements to it, and there wasn't really space for him, especially to hold that and to share that and to move through that. But the witnessing piece, and gifts, whatever gifts that there might be for mama to be mama and to and I think for me, I'm sorry if I'm all over the place and rambling here. The gift that I always give to pregnant mamas now is this incredible book, by it's called the First 40 Days, and I think I sent it to you.
You did send it to me.
That's my go-to mama gift now. It's called The First 40 Days, The Essential Art of Nourishing the New Mother. And it is written by Amelie Grieven, Heng U, and Marissa Balger. And it's part recipe book and part, I don't know, how would you describe it? I don't know how to describe the first half of the book.
It's
Wisdom.
different rituals and practices, and also, yes, recipes to nourish mama. Yeah.
Kind of recognizing that historically women were not, expected to get up after giving birth, but that there was this 40-day period called the lying in period, where mums and babies kind of stayed in bed together, the two of them, as they adjusted to being this new duo. And it has these incredible recipes for postpartum nourishment, because so much nutrition is lost in that process. And I'd say, like, a really important ritual of making the transition is preparing for the transition by making soups and freezing them, setting up a meal train to make sure that you'll be taken care of as you prepare to take care of your baby. For me, that was a huge piece of it for us.
You talked a little bit about, I love how you mentioned the father or the partner in the relationship, because you're so right. Brett and John have gone through these massive shifts in their life as well, and there's not conversation for them necessarily to process or move through it. And again, it's another huge role that's overlooked. If you're open to sharing, I know you and I have talked about the traumatic parts of both of our births. How are you can share should you desire, you don't have to. How do you feel you are in the process of healing the things that really hurt or startled you in your labor process?
Oh, it's a good question. I'm only 3 months out, and I talk about it a lot. I'm happy to share. So I very intentionally chose an out of hospital birth. I've spent a lot of time researching the world of birthing, and I have nothing against hospitals. I think they are really important. And my biggest thing is we should have choices. We should be able to choose how we birth, and all the options should be there. Hospital, home, birth center, whatever it is. I wanted a birth center birth. And I'll never forget when we interviewed my midwife. She told us her Cherokee ancestry, birth mythology was this idea of crossing the rainbow bridge, and that when a woman goes into labor, she has to cross over this rainbow bridge into the spirit world and bring her baby back. And that, for me, that's how I knew she was going to be my midwife, was when she told, and Brett and I both, we felt the same. And that was what kept me grounded and focused every time something was difficult in my pregnancy and in the birth. It's the rainbow bridge, right? It's not easy to cross the rainbow bridge, but that's what you have to do. And everything was, it was really hard and really painful. Like, it's hard to even describe the pain of childbirth. It was the strangest thing, but I was really determined to do it without medication. I came close to asking for an epidural, but I was really determined. And I felt completely safe the whole time that I was at the birthing center. And anyway, Dahlia came out and she wasn't breathing. And it took her a while. It was really, really, really scary. And it took her a while to find her breath, which maybe she gets that from me. And we ended up transferring to a hospital. I also had a second-degree tear that needed suturing, and between me and Dahlia, my midwife just wanted to be extra safe, and so she sent us to a hospital. And the OB on call at the hospital was just really terrible and so judgmental about my choice at a time where I was basically like bleeding and split open, she decided to criticize me. And that's really like the seed of my trauma. I think it's not even that Dahlia wasn't breathing, because I knew I had this innate in this, I just had this feeling in the moment she was going to be fine. I knew it. I knew it in my mama wisdom, I guess, that deep mama wisdom that we gather. Um, and I think talking about it for me has been a piece of the healing, just to say like this happened and it should not have happened, and people should reserve their judgment for themselves. And I went back to the mikvah right before I went back to work. And again, that was a really huge piece of the healing for me from that traumatic piece. And I wrote my birth story as I experienced it, and that was a huge piece of it for me. And I think it's really important to write your birth story, to share it with somebody, to have it, because I think we might forget, exactly what happened, and just to have that, to be able to pass that on to our children on their birthdays, whatever it is. I will say that my midwife was amazing, and she also invited us back to the birth center to do like what she called a reclaiming birth ritual, where I was able to sit in the tub with Dahlia, and I fed her in the tub, and we got to take a picture on the bed together as a family, and to reclaim that piece of it that we didn't have, and that was really special and healing.
Sophia, that's so beautiful.
Yeah, no, it was special. What have you done for your healing?
Yeah, and everything that you're saying, I love the word choice that you use, that people should reserve judgment for themselves. People always have the right to choose, and however they want to bring a baby earthside, crossing the rainbow bridge. The way you speak, I know you are choosing each word with intention, and I really feel that. I I can't, I love that you're 3 months out. This is massive, I think, for you to be clear like this. And just to remind everyone, Sophia is nursing Dahlia right now as we're having this conversation. And your memory recall and the fact that you can recall all these rituals and specific prayers and verbiage, that was something that took me a while to get back, just the quick memory recall. So good for you.
Thanks. I'm working on it still.
I did a couple things, I think, and I'm trying to, I did proper therapy. I went to a proper, that was a mixture of trying to heal things from October 7th and a birth that felt traumatizing. There's also, and that was okay for me. I have to say, I find it hard to find a therapist that you can really feel authentic with. I go through a phase where I like kind of date my therapist a little bit, and I want my therapist to really like me. It's like the people pleasing part of myself comes out as well.
That too.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard. So that was a big thing for me in my birth. I kept trying to please my doula. Like I kept feeling like I was performing for her. And at one point, deep into my birth, like after probably 30 hours of labor, I said to my doula that I'm so embarrassed that she's seeing me like this. And once I said that, I wish I had the wisdom to, because it's really not her fault. I agreed. I hired a very strong woman to support me because I thought that's what I wanted. But what I really wanted was someone incredibly gentle and compassionate. And I wish I had the wisdom to just allow her to leave the space. But I didn't want that to be something that I would not feel good about later on. So I was kind of battling all these different things and variations of myself that I was hoping to also heal at the same time. The thing that has really worked for me is, one, I do believe time heals all wounds. Talking about it, I have this really amazing midwife friend, and she really helped me dive deeper. She'll also be on the podcast coming up, Lauren, who's a midwife in Austin. She helped me kind of look at my birth in a little bit of a different angle. I see now where I needed to rise to the occasion in a different way, and I did, and I need to be a little bit gentler on myself in that process. And honestly, that was the experience I needed for me to ground into who I am right now. And I also just allowing my nervous system to relax and not needing to retell the story over and over and over again, that it wasn't, because in many ways it was the birth that I wanted. I was 2 seconds away from a hospital transfer. My midwives did let me push a little bit longer than intended. I felt so cared for with my midwives and by John. And then thank God, like our family was there right away in Austin supporting us. And it's so amazing how our brain works, because I remember different details now of the whole birth experience, and I just care about it so much less because it gave me my paradise. It gave me my Eden. So falling in love with my daughter healed the whole entire process. Falling in love with Eden healed me. And in there is the medicine of childbirth.
Beautiful. You make me cry.
Yeah, and I think we're supposed to lose ourselves in motherhood. And I let myself be lost in it, and I feel much better.
Well, I wonder if it's not losing ourselves, but it's about finding ourselves anew, you know. Like that's what it is. It's finding who we are as mothers and allowing and surrendering. For me, I think the biggest kavanah, the intention that I tried really hard to hold on to was like surrender, right? Surrender to the process, because there's only so much we can control. And that's also, I think, why the ritual pieces felt important, because it's like that's a tiny piece that we can control, that we can build an intention around the experience, and it will unfold however it's going to unfold. But we need to just, right, surrender to it, lose ourselves in the experience in order to find ourselves again, anew. And I'm totally with you. I mean, it might still be the postpartum hormones for me, but I look at Dahlia every day and I burst into tears because I cannot fathom like how she is mine. And she's amazing. I
She's
have an,
amazing.
have an amazing baby, and I just cannot, and I didn't know my heart could hold this much love. It's really terrifying and amazing at the same time.
I always felt that if two people were going to birth the Messiah, it's you and Brett.
Oh boy, that's a lot of pressure for my kid. No pressure, Dahlia. Be whoever you want to be. I want to talk a little bit about the placenta,
Oh,
um,
yes, please.
because I know that you buried a piece of yours as well. And that's actually a really an ancient Talmudic Jewish custom, was to bury the placenta and to plant a tree over it. And it was either a cedar tree or I don't remember the other kind of tree, but then that tree, when the child grew up, the wood from that tree would be cut down and turned into a chuppah for that child, which was like one of the most
Oh
beautiful
my
things
God, I love that.
I learned. And it was really important to me to bury Dahlia's placenta, which obviously we live in the middle of Los Angeles, a bit of a complicated thing to figure out. Um, and in the hospital transfer, there was a lot of commotion, and the hospital was like ready to throw it out. They're like, you have to get this out of here like now. You know, if you're gonna keep it, you got to get it out of this room immediately. And we had to kind of scramble to figure that out. But when she was 8 days old, we bought a lemon tree, and when she was 8 days old, and we gave her her name, we buried the placenta. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, was this placenta. Um, I always say it's the original Eitz Chaim, the original tree of life, and it really does look that way. Really does look that way. I really thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, and I was so excited to see it and to honor it and to honor the role that it played in sustaining my baby. And we buried it, and her lemon tree totally bloomed. Um, it took a good few weeks, but in the last couple of weeks, it just like, all these blossoms started to sprout, and it must have been because the roots reached the placenta. And it was a very sacred ritual to be able to honor this thing. And I spoke to some women in an older generation who told me they didn't even see their placentas after they had their babies, which to me is, not how it should be. So that's another ritual that I really want to encourage. Going back to also the healing piece and the honoring the mother self, that I think that's a piece of it too, to like that this organ that grows with us, perhaps that's the thing where our motherhood grows, is in this organ. That's an amazing ritual to honor that transition, and I'd love to hear what you did.
The placenta is so sacred, and I have kind of a crazy story about my placenta. after 40 hours of natural labor. And this is the thing that's so crazy. I have all of this on video because I thought I'm going to have this majestic, beautiful birth. And I did have a majestic, beautiful birth. And I'm going to want to share it. And the truth is, I look at these videos and I just see myself so raw and like in deep. I'll say the mantra that I shared, and I shared this with you as well. The mantra that got me through it is, I am not unique. This is not a unique experience. I am not unique. This is not a unique experience. And that really helped me. And I can look at the videos as I'm pushing, as I'm laboring, as I'm having contractions. John ohmed with every single contraction, which was really beautiful and powerful. And I was so in it that I wasn't even always aware of him ohming. So after Eden was born, and John says she's a girl, and they put her on my chest, and the placenta is still attached, and thank God, she came out screaming and breathing, thank God, with a cone head. I'm laying there and I'm so out of it. And my contractions were never close together. I was only contracting every couple minutes. So they never got close together. That was just my process. My midwives were concerned that it was going to take a while to get the placenta out. And if your placenta isn't out in 30 minutes, it's a hospital transfer. And I felt like I was so close already. Like, I'm not going to the hospital now. This is not happening. So I have on video, one of the midwives says to me, let us know when you have contractions again, because it means that your placenta's coming. And I said, I have contractions, and I didn't. And they like yanked out my placenta. And months later, John and I had a healing session with a cranial sacral therapist in Austin because Eden wasn't sleeping well, which I just wish I could go back and say, that's so normal. You don't need to do all of these crazy things. It's very normal for a baby not to sleep. She's new here. But with the advice from our pediatrician, from our wellness practitioner at the time, she recommended that we meet with this healer. So we have this healing session, and she shows up and she says to me, your placenta's a little bit angry with you because of how she was like yanked out. And there's no way she could have known that. And I found that to be quite interesting. And now I'm a year plus postpartum, a year and a month postpartum by the time this episode comes out. And I've just finally gotten back into having regular movement practices, going on longer walks, going to yoga, doing the Peloton. And every time I do an up dog in yoga, where I'm like stretching my lower stomach, my body has that, I could feel the scar tissue in my womb. I can feel where that healing needs to occur. So I'll also add, I had my placenta encapsulated, and it made me more anxious. It was a negative thing for me early on postpartum. I might try it again at some point. They're in the freezer right here in my parents' house. And for me, yeah, I've heard from a handful of women that also their placenta made them more anxious. So I did not take mine. Have you taken them yet?
I thought about, do I want to consume? My mom had both her babies at home, and she told me that like kind of her instincts kicked in after we were born, and she just said, give me the placenta. And she I think she had it in a smoothie. But she, in her memory, it was so helpful, and she felt this rush of energy and life coming. I always had the question of, what does Jewish law actually say about whether one can consume one's placenta? And I need to find the answer still to that question. But I wanted to keep it intact because I wanted to bury it. That was the ritual. That was the way I wanted to honor it and hold it dear. So I didn't eat it. In hindsight, like, it probably would have maybe been good for me because I was in such shock, and I was like very depleted, and I had such a nasty secondary tear postpartum, and I was so traumatized by the surgeon who stitched me up that I thought she'd intentionally like butchered me. And I think anyway, there's no going back, right? We can only go forward. And I also think that the metaphor of the rainbow bridge, it holds, for that entire postpartum period. We're still crossing that rainbow bridge. It doesn't end when you get your baby. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. I'm so sorry that happened also. Like,
Thank you.
I would write a negative review just to let other women know.
The doctor only has negative reviews. If I Googled her, somebody wrote, "This is where vaginas go to die."
Oh my God. That sounds
So,
like a good friend.
yeah. So I was gonna ask you something, but I forgot. I wrote something at midnight.
Yeah. Sophia, it's so nourishing to be in your presence and to receive these rituals. You're talking about practices people desperately need to connect more deeply to truly the most sacred rite of passage ever, ever, ever. I love the Jewish lens, of course. Assuming this episode goes viral and is received by all beings around the world, what is some wisdom that you would want to share with them?
Um, I think I was reflecting on the lessons Dahlia has taught me at 2 months of age. I think the single most important piece of wisdom that I learned from giving birth, and I imagine you resonate with this, I can do hard things, right? We can do, and that was what my midwife kept saying to me. She said, "You can do this. You can do hard things. I know you can." And it made me feel like I could continue. I think that's a really important piece of wisdom. I think a lot of people approach childbirth with immense fear, to just say you can do hard things, surrender to the process, embrace it, invite it into the realm of ritual. You can do hard things. We need our support system hugely. We cannot do it alone. We need wisdom from other mamas. We need parents and partners and doulas and postpartum doulas and night nurses and lactation consultants and all the support we can get to kind of make this transition. And I'd say the other wisdom is we all have, I think, inherent wisdom like built into the bone, our bones, and it's really important to find ways to let that wisdom out and to honor it through ritual, through I know meditation is a huge piece of your practice, storytelling. Both of us have spoken about the power of telling our birth stories, whatever ways we can to honor that wisdom. Um, and like you said, also it's really magical when we find ourselves in our motherhood.
Amen. A woman. Totally with you in all of that. Rabbi Sofia Zway, how can people find you and connect with you?
So I'm on Instagram at the Rabbi Zway, Zway. Always happy to connect that way. If you live in Los Angeles, if you pass through Los Angeles, please come and spend a Shabbat with us at our community base Los Angeles. You can find basemovement.org is where you can kind of find the details for that. I do have a website, rabbisofiazway.com. You can contact me that way. I'm really happy, it's a really important part of my mission as a rabbi to support people through their birth journeys. And if anyone wants to co-create a ritual with me, if that's something that you want to honor this journey, I'd love to create that with you. Feel free to be in touch.
You are the most beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Erin. Thanks for having me and going on the journey with me too. And it's very amazing to have someone else who's been through this to be able to share the pain and the joy and all of it.
I know I'm so grateful as well. You're so right. Thank you so much.
Mhm.